you are stepmom to a teen or any child who's going to be a teen, you are definitely going to want to hear from today's guest. You are going to love this discussion. I'm Cameron. I spent years building my career and creating a life I loved. And when my Prince Charming finally showed up, he had 4 kids in tow. Fast forward through lots of mistakes made and lessons learned, step family life was much more complicated than I realized. If you're looking for help with blended family life, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Stepmom Diaries, where we keep it real as we dish about all the things. This is your weekly dose of blended family inspiration and encouragement. You're not the wicked stepmother, so let me help you find your fairy tale ending. Come on, let's do this. Hey there, it's been a minute since we've had a guest, and I have got a treat for you. We have got a number of guests coming up in upcoming weeks, and starting with today's. And let me tell you, if you are a stepmom or a parent to a teen or a child who will be a teen at some point, you are going to love hearing from today's guest. We have got a wonderful expert on adolescence and adolescent depression with us today. And spoiler alert, she is going to be speaking at the Stepmom Summit that I am co-hosting with Beth McDonough of the Inclusive Stepmom in August. What's the Stepmom Summit, you might ask? Well, this is going to be a great 3-day event where you are going to hear from the top experts around the world in the stepmom space, including today's expert, Dr. Courtney Conley. You are not going to want to miss the free summit. Today is going to be a little bit of a sneak peek, but you are not going to want to miss this amazing 3-day event in August. So getting back to today, Dr. Courtney Conley, who we have on, is an author, a therapist, and an educator who specializes in working with adolescents. Courtney's passion for helping adolescents stems back from her own teenage years, and we're going to dig into that a little bit. Her mission is to equip adolescents with the tools that they need to successfully navigate their teenage years, but she also partners with parents to support young people and learn how to understand them. It's really fascinating work. Her book, Your Daughter Doesn't Have to Be Miserable, An Approach to Supporting Your Teenage Daughter Through Depression, teaches parents the strategies they need to connect with and help their struggling teen. She currently resides in a suburb of Washington, D.C., where she continues to serve adolescents and their families in her private practice, expanding horizons counseling and wellness. This is going to be a great interview. I think you're really going to love it. I'm so excited you're here. And as I mentioned, Courtney is also going to be sharing her expertise at our first annual Stepmom Summit, which will be happening August 26th to the 28th, and I will put all the links in the show notes. So let's dive in. Courtney, I'm so excited you're here.
It's so great to be on here chatting with you.
Yeah. So for all you listening, I've gone through Courtney's amazing background, but in addition to all that, she is going to be sharing her expertise at our first annual Stepmom Summit next month. So we are so excited that she's going to be there. It'll be August 26th through 28th, and I will put all the registration information and the links in the show notes. So, I think let's dive in to this, great speaker, great resource, great expert that we've got today. So, Courtney, I'm so interested in your career, and I know that, you have worked over the years to support adolescents directly and indirectly. Tell me how you got into all this.
I got into all of this. There was always a part of me, I think, that was drawn to helping people in general. And what really made me kind of niche down and want to work with adolescents and their parents so much was my own struggles during my teenage years. It was not easy for me, like 7th through 12th grade, I would say. A lot of depression and things that I struggled with myself. And I just had this feeling once I moved through that, once I moved past it, that it didn't need to be like that, for other teenagers. And as I was working with the teenagers so much, I realized that on the other side of that are also parents who need support and, how to work with, their teenagers. So I really kind of started out with my heart in adolescence, and then realized, what a big part of supporting them is also supporting their parents. So I went into school counseling for a while, and I did that for a while, and then I transitioned into private practice and then teaching other counselors, and a lot of the work that I do in teaching future counselors is working with adolescents and how to work with them and their parents and support, support their growth and healing through those often challenging years.
It is. It's so challenging. And I remember, and I've got several teenage stepkids. I mean, I remember being a teenager and having like all the emotions, but not really knowing how to deal with it, and thinking that my parents were so stupid because they didn't know how to deal with it either. And now, of course, I'm on the flip side of it. And, I remember it, but I'm not totally sure how to communicate with them, in a way that translates. So, I think it's really invaluable that you're able to sort of bridge that divide and, help the parents understand, what it is that a teenager is actually saying when they say something that just totally doesn't make sense to them.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. You said bridge that divide. It's almost like a language barrier, really, because I have worked with hundreds, probably approaching on thousands of adolescents at this point. And the most consistent message that I hear from them is that they feel like their parents don't care, they don't understand, or they don't really value what they have to say. Like their input doesn't matter. And it's funny because I've worked with enough parents on the other side of that to know that's not the case.
Yeah.
They do care and they do value. It's just,
but maybe they don't understand.
Yes, or it's just that disconnect, right? It's like, how do we show that then? How do we communicate in a way that shows that? So that's really a lot of when I work with parents, what I focus on is communication. And learning how to do that and how to connect, because I think that's such a huge piece in making somebody feel heard, allowing them to feel heard and understood also leads to them feeling valued. And so that's really usually where I start, honestly.
And so many times I know I've seen this with my husband and his kids, and I'm sure he's seen it with me. It's like I can watch him say something to the kids, and I know exactly what he's saying, but I can watch how they receive it, and then I watch what they say back, and like they're talking completely past each other, Mm-hmm. And I want to jump in and say, neither of you mean what you're saying. You mean something totally different. So, one of the interesting things about your book is that you do teach parents these strategies to kind of connect with and help, and the book is aimed towards their struggling daughter. Mm-hmm. Why did you focus on daughters versus sons? And how are the challenges facing, teenage girls and boys different?
Well, so I focused in mostly on adolescent females, one, because I was one, so I feel like I have that experience to draw from there. But also because most of my experience in who chooses to come to me, as a school counselor, I worked with everyone, obviously. But I started finding patterns and themes to what the girls were going through. And a lot of the adolescent females would come to me for things related to like social pressures and relationships with their friends, just a lot of different challenges that I didn't see teenage boys struggling with. So I don't know if I'm the best person to bring that message to them, just because my experience is so heavily aligned with female adolescents. But I can say there are some similarities for sure in what they go through in terms of social pressures, because just like some of the teenage girls that I work with have this need to fit in and look like whatever social influencers are out there that they're following, the boys do too. So there's definitely some commonalities, some similarities, but I've seen some patterns and some themes to what girls struggle with a little bit more consistently than what I see boys struggle with.
And social media has added a whole new dynamic to that. I mean, I didn't have that as a teenager, and I remember the pressures to fit in, and you wanted to look a certain way, and have certain clothes, and be friends with certain people. I mean, there is a lot of pressure as a teenager, but I can't imagine how difficult it is for them now with all the pressures around social media and over sexualizing and all that kind of stuff.
And they're bombarded. I mean, we all are really, but yeah. I mean, I think at their developmental state, it's a bit more critical because they have trouble deciphering reality from this ideal, that's being presented to them as reality or being presented to them as the standard or the bar that they should be meeting.
They really do. And I know that we've had conversations in our house about stuff that, they've seen online and people that they're following. And you have to sort of talk to them about, maybe this is not the right message to be taking from this. Maybe these aren't the right lessons that, you're picking up from all this. I don't know.
Yeah. And I do a lot of challenging those beliefs with them. Because they develop this idea that the way they look is wrong. And that only exists if they're comparing themselves to somebody else who they feel like looks right. But we know that there's no one right way to look. Everyone is uniquely who they are. And we only think that because of what's being presented to us. And so when we work on stuff like self-esteem and comparing ourselves to others, and I'm able to challenge those beliefs with them and kind of drill down a little bit, they realize at the end of it, there really is no good reason for them to think or feel that way. They're only kind of absorbing the messages that have been presented around them. So it's awesome to see them kind of have that awareness and that awakening too. Like, yeah, this only makes sense if I'm looking at this and then comparing myself to it.
Right. And it's hard to compare yourself as a teenager to, some of these influencers or TikTok stars have had a ton of plastic surgery to look that way. And, it's getting them to sort of see that they're beautiful in their own skin is huge. I mean, that's so valuable.
Absolutely. I mean, and the things that aren't even realistic around it, right? Like pictures that are posted that it's like, oh, I just woke up. No. No, there's a lot, of makeup and posing and lights and this and that. I have a interesting YouTube video that I show the kids too, because it shows like how some of these people like get these different angles and all the extremes they go to, to do these things and stuff too. And so, yeah, just really working with that self-acceptance and getting them to see like there is no one right way to look, It really being comfortable in your skin and settling in with that does a lot for your confidence and then how you're able to go out there and just be more comfortable in the world with who you are.
Right. What do you think is sort of the most unexpected piece of advice that you give to parents in your book and in dealing with young women of a teenage variety?
I'm not sure exactly about unexpected. I have kind of two thoughts. One, I feel like people always immediately want to jump to like, give me the technique, give me the solution. And I think what parents end up finding in what I do present as like the middle chunk of my book is really that like wellness and self-care piece, because our power in connecting with our kids and in everything that we do with our kids lies in our response. And we are unable to respond intentionally and in a way that's going to allow communication or better communication if we are not in a position of, wellness. And I find that a lot of times parents and moms that I'm working with have just completely depleted their emotional reserves. And until you take the time to kind of build some of that up, you're going to be very reactionary to your kids, right? Just as, they push your buttons, they're going to push your buttons. And your power lies in your response. You can only do that if you have kind of given yourself some love and some patience, kindness, and care yourself. And so I don't know. I mean, it doesn't really sound like unexpected advice, but I think it goes in a different direction than some of the parents are expecting when they first work with me. Because after we work on kind of building up their emotional reserves, they see that and they understand that. I can't respond from a calm, patient place if I'm just completely frazzled and worn down.
That's so true. And I love, love, love hearing that, because one of the things that I talk about with my stepmoms all the time is the importance of self-care, and the fact that, like, you are not going to be a good wife, you're not going to be a good stepmom, you're not going to be a good daughter or sister or employee or anything else if you're not taking care of yourself. And it's so important. And you've kind of hit the nail on the head there with, relating to your kids or your stepkids, that you're not going to be able to, stay calm in the face of, you're not my mom, or, whatever else is getting screamed at you at any given moment. To be able to know how to sort of take charge of your part of the situation, and, act rationally and make sure that you're the best that you can be, so that it gives the other person, whether it's a stepchild or a biological child, a chance to be the best that they can be. I think that's just such a hugely important message.
Absolutely. And I think it kind of goes to the second piece that I said I kind of struggled between two different things that are usually unexpected for folks. But I talk a lot about validation, because that's the number one way when I hear teens talk about people in their lives, the adults, not caring, not understanding. I mean, validation is the best way to show somebody that you're listening to understand. And again, it goes back to that self-care piece, because we're going to want to go back at them rather than validate how they're feeling and take the time to hear them out and understand before we open that door to responding. But what a lot of folks confuse is validation with reinforcement. They feel like if they validate, okay, I understand that you're upset, I know this seems really hard for you, or whatever the argument is or the conflict is, just letting them know that their feelings aren't wrong, right? That you hear them and you understand them is part of validation. And what people confuse that with is reinforcement. They feel like if I validate your feelings, that's going to reinforce your negative behavior. I do this every day, one with teenagers, but two with my own, little ones. If my daughter wants a Minion popsicle before she goes to bed at 9:00 at night, well, no. But as she's tantruming, I can say, I know it's very difficult and disappointing when you want something and you can't have it. And
I know how awesome that Minion popsicle sounds.
Oh, yeah.
Or whatever,
So yummy, right? And you want to have it, you can't, and that's so irritating. But, I'm not reinforcing the tantrum. It really serves to de-escalate, honestly, because if I'm not trying to argue with your feelings, if feelings get your needs met, right? And so if somebody's trying to convey a feeling to you and the other person is trying to argue with the feeling, they have two options. Neither of them are good. They can either escalate, right, to try to get their message heard no matter what you're doing. So that's where we get the yelling, the screaming, the slamming the doors. What can I do to up the ante so you hear my message? Or they can give up and shut down and withdraw. And you might see either one with kids, but neither one are good, and neither one form connection, and neither one are what we want. But if we take the time, and again, we can only do this if we're in a position of wellness and patient and calm. If we take the time to validate and say, I hear you, I think what you're saying is important, and I want to understand, then they're more willing to hear our side of things, and we can actually enter into a conversation around it.
That's so important. Now, how, I know there's the run-of-the-mill teenage struggle with, feeling accepted, feeling validated, figuring out where your place in the world is, right? And we've all been there. How can parents identify when what their teen is going through is more serious than just that normal stuff, because, so often I think parents find themselves dealing with something really serious, whether it's a depression or suicidal, thoughts that the child is having, or they get into drugs or alcohol or whatever, and like they hadn't seen the signs, they hadn't realized. So what is it they should be looking for? How can they tell if things are more serious than just some of these kind of normal teen feelings?
Yeah, I think what you really want to look for is severity and duration, right? Especially when we're talking about something like anxiety or depression, because life is always going to have ups and downs, and you could have an argument with a friend, and for teenagers, that turns their life completely upside down. It changes their social circle. So having that impact you for a week or a week and a half is different than seeing your child, slowly retreat and stay that way for months. So I think I would, one, kind of keep a pulse on if they're open with you and you can connect with them and get them to talk with you. Keep a pulse on some of the changes going on in their life, or an eye on, who maybe they had over all the time and now they don't. Things to you that would signify a change or a reason behind a change for, maybe being down for a little bit. But that's very different than seeing some of the more prolonged changes that come around when you're looking at something more like clinical depression, something that would be clinically significant, like decreased appetite and just sleeping all the time. And I know teenagers like to stay up late and sleep in, so I'm not talking about that, but just in general, shifts and changes to once, they enjoy these activities and now they don't want to take part in it anymore, feeling like you don't have any motivation or energy, not caring about some of the things that you used to care about before. And I don't think that this could, is debatable in some people's eyes. I will say that, but I don't think grades are always an indication, because I know plenty of teenagers who can hold it together in school, right, for grades and, keeping up with that kind of stuff, but it's showing in other areas of their lives. But for others, it could be an indication, if you're talking about depression and not really caring about things that used to be important to you anymore. So I think that one can be, very dependent on the person. But I know a lot of kiddos with anxiety and things like that, can really keep their grades up there and kind of keep a good outward appearance when internally things are not going great and they're suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So really, keeping a pulse on what's going on and what you're seeing, and if you're seeing changes, I think is the best way, especially if you're not quite there, with the kid yet, in terms of connection and open communication and things like that.
And what do you think? So, we've got a lot of stepmoms that are listening. What do you think the challenges are that are facing teens in blended families that are different from those that are facing teens in biological families? It's such a different dynamic, and there can be a million unique issues in every family, but just generally, how do you think it impacts teens?
I would say that this is dependent on a couple of things. How recent, right, is the blending of the family and the transition and all of that, and then the circumstances around it. Because for some teenagers, these things happened, when they were much younger, and so it's not necessarily showing up in the same way. For other teenagers, if divorce or something else has occurred, and then there is now blending of families when they're already teenagers, it can look a little different. And a lot of times it's almost like learning a new dance, because you're introducing people to each other, living closely together in an environment, all of that, and you're learning each other. During the same time, the teenager is also kind of trying to learn themselves and figure out who they are. So a lot of times when I'm working with blended families, it's almost like, who's going to put down the armor? Because everybody kind of has their defenses up. And, sometimes the teenagers want to lower their defenses and be more loving and lean more towards like treating that person like a mom, but they don't know how because there's this weird transition that's going on within them where they're not a child anymore, but they're not an adult anymore, and so it's awkward sometimes for them. They want to be close and loving, but that can be awkward for them as well. So one of the things that I always talk about when we work on those kinds of things in relationships is just trying to be open and honest and being willing to be vulnerable with the teen as well. Like, I know this feels awkward to you, but I really enjoy being in your life and just being open, even though it might make us feel vulnerable too.
Yeah, and that's hard. I mean, depending on the situation, you could be looking at, 5 to 9 years of like real hard family life if that is in a difficult place, and I kind of approach it the same way. And I always tell my stepmoms, I am not afraid to be awkward with our kids. And I've said to them on more than one occasion, or started a sentence on more than one occasions with, I know this is weird because I'm not your mom or your dad, but we have this unique relationship, right? And we get to kind of figure out what that is, so we can talk about things in a different way. And it's a huge opportunity if the teen is willing to accept the step parent, and that's where things can get hard because every situation's different. They may have a biological mom who's really pulling the other way and makes them feel torn, and or it may have been, there may be a lot of high conflict stuff going on between households, and, that makes them feel weird. And it can be really challenging.
Absolutely. And just the introduction of a new person in your life too, and again, like I said, depending on when that person entered in too, I think really impacts the transition. And like you said, circumstances around that. But even with high conflict situations, because that's really where the communication piece comes in so much, and the self-care, like we already talked about. But helping people, even if you said something beautiful, and I'm not going to quote it perfectly, but you said something about we get to figure out what that looks like. And a lot of times the kids in families, in any family, right, don't have a lot of say of what's going on. They don't get a choice. They don't get to, have a say in what's happening in their lives. And so I think what you said is amazing because, I'm in your life and that might not be your choice. But what do we want that to look like? And I'm okay with whatever that is, And
we can figure that out together. So you do get a choice in it,
Yeah. Allowing them to have that voice and to feel heard.
Yeah. And I found, it's, at least in my stepmom experience, I think I was pretty clear with the kids up front that like, I'm here. I'm not your mom. I'm not trying to be your mom. You have a mom that loves you. You have a dad that loves you. So, let's figure out each of us what this is going to look like, us being in each other's lives, and sometimes kids are more accepting of it than others, but, I think it is, it can be challenging. What is the most common, I always hear from, the two kind of big challenges that I hear about a lot from stepmoms are, some of the challenges around dealing with the ex, with the bio mom, and then, challenges in dealing with the kids, or even sometimes how their spouse deals with the kids, and maybe there's a difference of opinion there. What's the most common mistake that you see stepmoms making in dealing with struggling teens? We all want to do our best, right? But I always like to tell my stepmoms I've made every mistake in the book and have learned from them. But, what is it that you see that we as stepmoms can do a better job of in dealing with teens?
Oh, gosh. This is going to kind of sound conflicting in a way. But sometimes I think it goes back to that balance between having that self-care and that confidence, because you're also a member of the family, right? And so I sometimes see where stepmoms also don't know their place, right? Which is okay. This is new for everybody. It's new for the teen. We're just working on,
Everybody's
everybody
trying to
here.
figure it out.
Exactly, yeah. But where they take too much of a step back, or they're always relaying messages through the spouse, through dad. And so sometimes that generates resentment because it's always coming through dad to the kids. And so the idea and the blame and everything else, like they know where the message is coming from. So then they start to feel like, okay, well, everything is her way, or this is because so-and-so doesn't like it, or, oh, we can't do this because, she doesn't like it, or she doesn't agree with it. And so I think sometimes, yes, it has to be a balance, but I also feel like, as part of the family too, we don't want to always have our communication coming through somebody else because it feels more safe and comfortable than putting ourselves out there and being vulnerable, because that can look a lot of different ways to the kids and usually ends up with resentment.
Yeah, that's such a hard, I love that you brought that up. That's such a hard balance to strike for stepmoms because, they are trying to figure out their place in the family, and especially in how they're relating to the kids. And, for things like discipline, it's like as a stepmom, you don't want to be out there disciplining the kids because, you're this new person in this new family dynamic. Mm-hmm. But then that can lead into conflict with your spouse. And I know I've had these discussions with mine where, your spouse wants to have a partner and it doesn't maybe always want to be the heavy. And so you're trying to figure out like how to, enforce house rules and, how to, and how to have consequences for actions and stuff like that. And, as a stepmom, your place in all that can be really tricky. Mm-hmm. Especially when you're still trying to bond with those kids, because until that bond is fully established, you don't want to sort of overstep. So it's it's an important point you're making, but that's a really hard thing for stepmoms to navigate sometimes,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of it too is having that connection with your partner too.
Right.
And kind of how is this going to look? How do we want this to look? Here's what I'm not comfortable with. Okay, well, here's what I'm not comfortable with, and having that hopefully being on, the same page. And I know that's hard too, just sometimes being on the same page because we all have different parenting styles and, we were all raised a little differently and everything else. So that's a challenge in and of itself. But I think what helps with that, again, is having that communication and trying to be on the same page as much as possible. And then even your presentation, if there's something going on that you're like not thrilled with, how you approach the kids doesn't always have to be in this kind of harsh, punitive, manner. And so maybe you ease into it with a few things here and there, like, hey, I don't appreciate it, or I don't, I don't like it when you guys are just arguing all day, or, easing into it and having a common understanding of what feels okay, I think is probably where I would start with that. But I also feel like, again, when we expect somebody else to always deliver our message rather than it coming from us, it also sets us up for kind of a hard time when it comes to the thoughts and the feelings that the kids start to.
Yeah. But you're right. It all goes back to communication. I mean, in an ideal world, wouldn't it be great if, as stepmoms, if we sat down with our spouses, before we got married, before we merged households, and said, hey, this is how we want to handle things. This is what we want the house rules to be. This is, how we want to handle discipline, all that other kind of stuff. But I mean, if stepmoms, who are listening to this, if you're anything like I am, we didn't talk about any of that stuff. We were talking about, like, do we need to buy a new sofa? What furniture of yours is coming over and what furniture of mine is coming over, and what is the custody schedule going to look like? We did not talk about any of that stuff. Now, after the fact, we did, when we kind of got into the thick of things. And so, I mean, I guess my sort of comment is, it's never too late to have those discussions. Even if you're a year or two into it and you're sort of realizing that things are just a hot mess and all over the place. it's never too late to get on the same page and have those conversations about, what you want things to look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's never too late to sit down with your family. And this is, I think, really where people get stuck sometimes, because they'll come to me and they'll be like, it's just been this way for years, so I don't even know if there's any changing it now. And I'm like, okay, well, let's look at what's going on and what we want to change. And then trying to get everyone on the same page at that point. It's never too late to start having those conversations, to set a boundary if one needs to be in place, to say, hey, you know what, this is how things are going and I'm not enjoying it. So can we look at shifting? This is going to be the new family rule, or whatever the case might be. Is it tough? Is it a tough transition for probably a couple of weeks? Yes. Is it often worth it in the end? Yes. If it brings a bit more sanity, to the family, waiting out that 2 weeks, where it's a challenge and a struggle, if we're setting a new rule or a new boundary with our teenager, or, something like that. Yes, they can definitely make it challenging for a couple of weeks. But after that, they sort of realize, okay, this is definitely, they're towing this line. Like this is staying. And so initially it's the heavy lifting. And then after that, it typically will help with whatever you're trying to get under control. So yeah, it's definitely never too late. It's never too late.
Yeah.
I don't care if they're 18 and getting ready to leave for college after summer. If something's not working, and you can bring a little bit more sanity around it, it's never too late to say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. This isn't working. And here's my suggestion for how we put it in a direction that's going to work for all of us.
I love that. And I think that's a great optimistic tone for us to start wrapping things up, is that it's never too late to reset. It's never too late to get the communication straight. It's never too late to, start working on something, a pattern or anything else that has been, festering in your family or your step family. So before we wrap up, I always like to ask, a fun question. So I want to know what you're binge watching right now.
Oh, goodness. Well, so I love cooking shows. So I do like the whole Chopped and all that kind of stuff.
We love Chopped. That's a great one with kids too.
Yes. And my kids have actually started getting into it too with me a little bit. And my daughter, we call her Sissy. My daughter watches some cooking with kids, like a more kids related cooking show. I can't remember of it off the top of my head. So I would love to tell you that I just sit down and binge things, but I'm telling you, I mostly am watching whatever my kids are watching.
They're right at that age. So that probably makes sense.
But if I could binge something, I mean, I'm like a House Hunters International person. I love travel, all that kind of stuff. So any kind of like international, like Buying the Beach, and then the cooking
I love all those shows.
Yes, that's where I'm at if I have the time.
Oh, good. Well, I love it. Thank you so much for being here. And if you want to find more of Courtney, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I've had a therapy session today. This is like such good information. But if you want more of Courtney, Courtney, why don't you tell folks where they can find you? Yes.
Okay. So my website is just Courtney-Conley.com. My email is info@Courtney-Conley.com. You can also find me on Instagram at dr.courtconley. So yeah, social or email or my website is the best place to find me.
And I will put all of those links in our show notes. And if you have not yet signed up for the Stepmom Summit, which by the way is totally free, and we have got over 20 speakers. Courtney is one of them, and we're so excited. We have got some of the best experts around that are going to be speaking to our attendees. So head on over to the stepmomsummit.com and sign up. And thank you so much, Courtney, for being here. This was so fun.
Yes, thank you for having me.
That's it for this week. If you've enjoyed our chat, I hope you'll help spread the word. Share this episode with friends and head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts and leave me a review. And don't forget, For more great stepmom content, head on over to thiscustomlife.com and follow me on social media. Just search This Custom Life on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. Until next time, you keep being you and know that we are in this together. See you here next week.